All right, Nanny. Well, here we are at interview number 3 already. It seems like they're going by really fast.
Yeah, it does.
So today's topic is World War II. And so I've got some of my own questions, but then I've also talked to some of your other grandkids, and they've submitted questions for you. So I'll go through those real quick. And some of them are kind of duplicate as well.
Yeah.
But as far as the time period leading up to World War II in like the 30s and things like that, do you remember anything in the news as far as like the build up to it, especially with Germany taking land in Europe and all that?
Uh-huh. Well, I can remember my grandmother, my daddy's mother,
Mm-hmm.
talking about that and talking about Hitler. She was German,
Right.
and she would listen on the radio, Hitler talking, and she just really hated him.
Right.
But I guess I learned a lot from her. So.
Gotcha. And that would have been speeches they were playing before the U.S. got involved in the war?
Oh yeah.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. So let's get to the U.S. entering World War II. What do you remember about Pearl Harbor?
Well, I remember how surprised I was and how bad it was. And I actually knew a boy from Jeffersonville. That's where I was born and raised. And he was in the Navy, and he was on one of those ships
Oh,
that
wow.
was at Pearl Harbor when it got bombed. But he was alive after the bombing and continued to go down and pull other sailors up to safety.
Oh, wow.
But the last time he went down, he never made it back. So
Wow.
he lost his life there. But when at that time, I was living in Macon and going to school up there. It was a business college, they called it. And on the weekend, I would come home, and Sunday afternoon, I know they would take me back every Sunday afternoon. And my mother was so afraid that the bombing was going to come over here, she didn't want me to go back up there, but I felt safe, and
Mm-hmm.
she allowed me to go back. So that was one of the big things, I guess. It was just almost unbelievable.
Do you remember kind of exactly where you were and how you found out about it?
Uh, Probably on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Up there in Macon or at home?
At home.
At home. Gotcha. So this question is from Jamie. She is asking, did you hear the Roosevelt speech live after that?
Yes, we always listened to his because we didn't have TV. We had to listen by radio. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the greatest presidents that ever lived.
Mm-hmm.
And
And kind of along the same, so this is also a question from Jamie. And she says, did you know anyone who fought overseas? And if so, how did they seem when they got back?
well, I didn't see all of them when they got back, but from my home there was quite a few young men, and actually, I think we realized a war was going to happen, and a lot of the boys in my senior class quit school and joined the forces.
Mm-hmm.
But I was telling you about the guy in the Navy, and one of my best friends, her brother, went into the Air Force. He flew a plane, and several of the young men joined the forces at that time.
For those who came back, did you notice, like, was there any change in them, or did?
I think it had an effect on them. Yeah.
Because I know nowadays we kind of have, I guess, more of a support system. Although there's still a long ways to go for veterans and people who fought. But I think back then there was much less
There was
of a support system for them.
All that aid and help happened over the years following.
So I know you mentioned, I think in the first interview, you talked about you got married during the war, right? And with Granddaddy possibly going off to war, but ultimately staying here to farm and kind of help with that war effort.
That's right.
That way.
They had a draft then,
Mm-hmm.
and it was between certain ages that they drafted you. But he was out okay for a while, not being drafted, but he finally got drafted. And he even went to Atlanta and passed his physical and was ready to go. But he got a message from the government saying, "Stay home. We need you to farm more than being a soldier." So
Right. That makes sense. You got to have food to fight, right?
That's right.
So what was it like here? And Courtney had this question too, but what was it like during wartime for y'all here?
We just lived our normal lives, and I, of course, went to work on Robins Air Force Base, and that was a real experience, because at that time they didn't call it Robins Air Force Base, and it was known as Wellston at that time. Of course, it's been changed a long time. But I worked with what they call the U.S. Engineers, and they were building the base, and I really worked in an area where we had to make progress reports every week, and had a plane waiting for our report to take it to the Pentagon.
Wow.
So it was an experience. I won't ever forget, they built a water tower across the road from our building, and one of the workers, they had put water in it, but they had never put the top on the tank. The guy went swimming in it. It was right funny.
Oh man. Yeah, and all that drinking water too, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
So kind of along the lines of what was it like during wartime, do you remember rationing, and did it affect you and your family at all?
It affected everybody. And even shoes, they rationed them. And we had tickets that we could use, but when you use those tickets up on something, you don't get any more. But sugar was rationed, coffee, gas, and we were very lucky at that time when we lived on the farm, because we were allowed to have a tank for gas for the tractors and everything. So
Okay.
we got more gas probably than the people that lived in the city.
Right. And I can't remember if I said at the beginning of that, but that question came from Craig, so he submitted that one. Here's another one from Jamie, and you kind of talked about it at the beginning about your mom and what she thought about what might happen, but did you ever think that any of the fighting could come here to America? Was that ever a concern?
No, I didn't. I just didn't think it would. I really didn't think it was going to last as long as it did, but I felt safe. I didn't feel like it would come over here.
Gotcha. And then the next couple, Jeremy submitted. He's the first one here is what was being told here. I know you mentioned kind of at the beginning about listening to what Hitler had to say, kind of before the U.S. got involved. But
right.
During the war, what was kind of being told here in America about Hitler and how was kind of he perceived?
Oh, everybody hated him.
Mm-hmm.
And he just did so many bad things,
Mm-hmm.
But he had built up a great army, and he did good to begin with, but we finally overcame him.
Mm-hmm. And then speaking of overcoming, what was it like? This is also from Jeremy, but what was it like to hear that we had won D-Day, especially?
Oh, it was wonderful. And you see pictures now, people in New York celebrating things.
Yeah.
Well, Macon was the biggest city next to us, but everybody went up there to the main street, Cherry Street, celebrating, dancing, yelling, hollering, everything.
I can imagine.
It was a wonderful time.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine, especially after those.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, you didn't expect it to last that long, and then it ended. So I can imagine how excited everyone was. Let's see. So that's kind of all the questions that I had. Was there anything else that you could remember that you want to mention, or?
Well, when we began to win the war, I had in our country home a map of Germany, and it had all the little towns and everything on it. I don't remember where I got it from.
Yeah.
But I put it on the wall, and every day we had the radio on, and it said our troops progressed to this town, to that town, and I had a pencil, and I would line it up there. I would mark it where they were. The next day we turned the radio on in the morning, and then our troops advanced so far, and I would take my pencil and draw it up there, and every day I kept up with it that way.
I love that.
Yeah.
Huh. And that must have been exciting to kind of watch the progress, too.
It was. And the Russian troops, Russia was on our side then. They would come down from the other side, and we were coming up from below that, So it was interesting to see how they met.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Very exciting time, I'm sure. But,
yeah.
Anything else you can think of from that time period?
Well, it was really hard, but we tried not to look at it that way,
Yeah.
And it was exciting to get a new pair of shoes.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't get but so many, We had to have tickets to get them. And other types of food. You couldn't buy sweets because sugar was rationed.
Right.
And there were various things. I guess we had plenty to eat because we lived on a farm at that time.
You mentioned rationing sugar and things like that. That made me think. Were there any recipes that you came up with based on what you had to work with at the time because of rationing?
Yeah, and that's when sweetener, like sweet and low and stuff, came into being then. And when we'd get sugar, we'd make a cake.
Mm-hmm.
Because we didn't have that much.
Right. Hmm. All right. Anything else?
No, it was just an experience, and we loved our president. At that time, everybody loved him.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't one-sided or anything like it is now.
Right.
And he started a lot of good programs and all, and helped people get back on their feet.
Gotcha.
And he had he had he was crippled,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a place in Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
and he called it the Little White House.
Mm-hmm.
And he would come down. It was polio, and people had polio a lot then, and they actually had bad cases, and a lot of them died from that. But as time went on, they discovered a shot we could take, would make us safe from that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a blessing back then too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, that's all I got. Unless you have anything else that you can think of.
Well, I don't know. You seem to forget things, but I guess if you go through a war like that, you don't never forget it.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for taking time to talk to us about World War II. What do you want to talk about next time? We talked about the moon landing. Does that sound like something fun to talk about?
Well, I don't know too much about that.
Can you
Except it happened.
can you give me the calculations on how to get to the moon from here?
No, just in a dream.
All right. So we'll probably talk about either that or something else if we come up with something
Okay.
else. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.